This podcast is sponsored by Bigger Brains, online training that won't bore you to tears. Expand the minds of your workforce at getbiggerbrains.com.
Welcome to Permission to Speak, the video blog and podcast that loiters at the intersection of leaders who want their people to speak up, technology that facilitates connections, and results that serve our higher purpose. Now, here's your host, Kelly Vandever.
Hi, welcome to the podcast. This is Kelly Vandever, and my special guest today is Dr. Joe Garcia. Dr. Garcia is the head of talent management and organizational effectiveness at the Home Depot, where he is responsible for enterprise-wide talent management systems, including change management, selection strategy, succession management, organizational design, performance management, and engagement surveys. In addition to more than 26 years of business experience in retail, medical equipment, life science, and management consulting, Dr. Garcia has extensive international experience consulting with multinationals in Europe, Latin America, and the Caribbean, and leading major selection and organizational development projects in Mexico, Venezuela, Argentina, and Brazil. Dr. Garcia holds a master's degree in industrial/organizational psychology from the University of Miami and conducted his doctoral studies at the University of Miami and the Fielding Institute, where he graduated with a PhD in human and organizational development. Welcome, Dr. Garcia, to the podcast.
Thank you, Kelly. Good to be with you.
All righty. As you know, we always start with a couple of quirky questions to get to know our guest first. So our first quirky question for you is, tell us about your favorite guilty pleasure television show.
Oh, my goodness. Guilty pleasure TV show, I would say probably the one that my wife criticizes me for watching, the Walking Dead. She goes, absolutely can have no idea why you watch that show. I'm fairly logical, right? And she's like, that show is like, it's just gore and craziness. I said, yeah, but the cliffhangers are amazing.
They are.
You have to wait for the next show to see what happens. So she's like, I cannot believe you're watching that show. So that's probably the one. Yeah.
Hey, it's preparing you for the zombie apocalypse too. So.
Probably, right? Why not? It could happen. She goes, no, absolutely not.
Oh, excellent. All righty. And then the next quirky question is, tell us something surprising about yourself that most people don't know.
So, in the work that I do, again, I'm pretty logical, right? We deal with numbers and research and a lot of stuff like that. So, but I do have a very strong artistic side, and what people even at work here may not know is that back in when I was young, I took acting classes. I was almost on a TV show. I then learned to play the drums. I was in a band, alternative rock band, and people here would die if they knew. They couldn't even imagine that I did that sort of thing. And now I paint. Now I picked up painting, so I do abstracts and that sort of thing. And so, but so I have I guess to compensate for some of the serious stuff we do here, I use the other side of the brain to exercise my creativity.
That's amazing. That's very cool. That's very cool. And I'm sure it helps balance you out very nicely.
I guess so. I hope so anyway, yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right, and now switching to something a little more serious. So what is your story? What happened in your life that got you to a place where you cared about employee engagement?
Wow. So this probably equates to why I chose to pursue industrial organizational psychology to begin with, a career that I did not even know existed, frankly, back when I was in high school. I took a job, so real quick, because it can get a little longer. I took a job as a teenager in retail, and it was a part-time job. I was going to school, and when I got there, they said, well, we don't have a permanent place to put you, but what we do is we have you, we send you to different departments. It was a department store, similar to Macy's or Nordstrom's. And so very little orientation, very, very little training. The only training we got was how to take money from people and bring up the cash register, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was the extent of the training. So day one, I show up, and I'm in the kids department, and it was sort of fun, but it was just, a little frustrating that I didn't know the merchandise, and I was just there for a little bit of time. And then next time, I would probably be in a different department. Day two, they call me back. They said, we have a need. Can you show up in an hour? I show up. I'm in women's intimate apparel.
No.
And I was like, are you kidding me? And I had all kinds of questions and things, and I felt awkward. I was like 17 or 18, and I'm like, what am I doing here? So marched into HR, and I said, look, it would help me if we could find a more permanent department that I can learn how to sell the merchandise and also know my hours better, because I have other things I need to do in school. So if we could have, a week went by, they called me, it says, great news, we have exactly what you were looking for, and they put me in a department. We sold a bunch of stuff, including chandeliers and lamps and things like that. So they put me in the third floor, which nobody ever went to, in the lamps department on a Tuesday morning. And at the time, even then, the chandeliers were like a couple $1,000s. So I stood there staring at the walls and staring at nothing for hours. And when somebody would come in and ask me for a very specific technical question on something related to lamps, I didn't have the product know-how. So I felt like the customer wasn't taken care of. I certainly wasn't. I'm going to school, so my mind is racing. I want to learn stuff. I want to contribute. I want to add value, and I'm just standing there to make whatever it was an hour. And I remember after a while I said, I have to quit. I can't do this anymore. So I quit, but it stuck in the back of my mind that here's a business that hired a person and didn't know how to make me and those working with me, because I wasn't alone. I met with a bunch of people who were just not very happy there. So I'm like, this is not right, because customers are not getting what they need. The employees are not getting anything except for the money, and it just doesn't make sense. They're leaving a lot of money on the table, and they actually were, because we were so disengaged that I had a colleague who would tell people, no, we don't have that anymore, because he didn't want to go into the stock room and search for it. Wow. He said to me, look, we don't make any commission, so why would I bother, going up a couple ladders and just grabbing a box and bringing it down? Might as well tell her that we don't have it, and she leaves. So when I saw that, I'm like, oh man, this is just not right. So it kind of stuck in the back of my mind that if I wanted to study human behavior, if I wanted to study psychology, because it was fun to do, but I needed to get a career out of it and make money one day, how would I do that? And I found industrial organizational psychology being a branch of psychology that kind of looked at that. And that was amazing. So I went after that, and the rest is history.
Very cool. Well, so how did you end up in HR when you that just was a natural branch out of studying the organizational psychology, or?
Well, so so we call it IO Psych, or IO psychology. There's basically 3 different areas you can go into. You can become a professor, which a lot of people do, right? So you can go into academia and do research. You can be a consultant and either run your own practice or work for a large consulting practice, and you advise clients who have needs and challenges anywhere from selection all the way to team integration to leadership development, etc. Or the third one is you can, if you find a company much like a Fortune 50, a Fortune 100 that is large enough, big enough, that would rather bring the talent internally, and so instead of outsourcing it to a consulting practice, you have a team of psychologists internally working for you. That's the third avenue you can pursue, and usually that team sits inside HR as a center of excellence. So we are that here. So we're a COE sitting inside HR, but my clients are the HR generalists and function leaders, if you will.
Gotcha. Okay.
So it's a natural progression for me. It's the best fit because I did consulting for a long time, and it's amazing, fascinating, but there's a lot of travel, and there's some pluses and minuses, right? You work with lots of clients, but you don't have one that you identify with and you work for and you benefit from. And here, as a member of the leadership team at Depot, certainly as we continue to do better as a business, we all, benefit from it and grow with the company, which is pretty exciting for me.
Very cool. Very cool. Now, I know one of I've read a few of the things that you studied, not the research, but that you have done the studying. And one of them was on low-performing stores at Home Depot. Would you mind discussing that research?
Yeah, well, that if we're both thinking about the same, it wasn't just looking at the low-performing. Okay. We were trying to. So there's a lot of research that has shown that engagement, how people feel about where they work, matters so much that it can end up impacting key metrics that businesses would look at, like customer service and sales, let's say, two basic metrics. Mm-hmm. And we knew that to be true from studies outside of Home Depot. But in talking to our CEO and other business leaders, it was interesting. We thought it would be interesting to explore whether we could prove that was also true within Home Depot, that we could use actual internal evidence to show that stores that had higher levels of engagement ended up performing better than those who were very low in engagement. And so we, instead of looking at stores that were, underperforming financially, we looked at those top, say, 100 stores that had the highest levels of engagement as measured through one of the tools that we have internally that we use to measure engagement versus the bottom 100. Mm-hmm. And we did that. We also ran a couple of other studies matching stores that were nearly identical in every way except for engagement. And we looked at their sales performance and turnover and customer service scores. And we found that indeed engagement was a predictor and was a factor. It wasn't the only factor that leads a business to do well or poorly, but it's a key factor in increasing levels of customer service and sales.
So it kind of affirmed what other research outside of Home Depot had found.
It did, and for us, that was very. Some companies are very, some leaders are, okay, great. If it's been shown externally, that must be true for us. But because of our size and the unique nature of our business, it was important to demonstrate, through our own internal research that it was also true here and the magnitude of the impact. So because they were curious about, we sort of know that it relates to it or it helps it, but how much, and can we get a sense of that? And so we, that was part of the research trying to explore what that looked like. So, and, to give you an example, we looked at turnover, and when people leave a company, it's pretty costly because you have to replace them and train them, and so it's and of course, as a consumer, as a customer, you walk in, you meet somebody brand new that doesn't know the store really well or the product really well, and it's frustrating for you. Mm-hmm. So it is critical for us to retain great talent. So turnover matters a great deal. Stores that were higher in engagement tended to have about 8% lower rates of turnover, and 8% for us is huge, right? So if we could take all those stores that have higher levels of turnover and encourage them to do better around the engagement challenge, then we would be impacting turnover, but also sales. There was a big difference in sales, so all of that created a sense of, okay, this is something that we want to pursue and take very seriously.
So, when can you share with us some of the things that you include in the tool that you use to measure engagement? What are some of the factors that matter in engagement, and maybe what don't?
I'll speak in general terms because part of it is we're a for-profit and we're competing in the marketplace. So I'd rather, and there's a lot of information out there that people can find. Gallup is a great. We don't use Gallup, but Gallup is one of the better known companies that has been measuring engagement and satisfaction for years, and they have the Gallup 12, so people can look that up online. But if you step back, there isn't a whole lot of magic, or this is not brain surgery, right? It's engagement. When you think about coming to work emotionally connected, thinking that, hey, I want to be here, not just I have to be here. And while I'm here, I'm going to give the right level of discretionary effort and attention and enthusiasm to my job. So things like, am I working in the right place? Do I understand the mission of the company? Do I align with the values of the company? Some of us may work beautifully in Wall Street, and because the values and the rewards match what we want, others may work beautifully in volunteer-type nonprofit businesses because they speak to you more. And if you put the wrong person in the wrong environment, they may not be just emotionally connected because this is not what turns me on. This is not what I'm all about. This is not what I value. So it starts with values alignment, and are you in the right in the right place? But there's also elements of how you feel about the treatment that you receive from leaders and from peers and others. So am I treated with respect? Do I matter? Are they treating me like a human being? And do I get enough of that sense that, hey, I'm not just a replaceable piece that you can get rid of, at any time and replace me with someone else. So that level of perception is important. The people you work with, do you like the people that you work with, is often a key variable in engagement. And there's also some evidence around, do I feel capable? If you feel that you can do the job well, you feel that you know what's expected of you, if you're getting good, supportive feedback, ongoing feedback that helps you do better, know that your boss has your back and that they have the best interest in mind. All of that comes together to give you a sense that, hey, I belong here. This is a place that respects me, takes care of me, and I will take care of it in return. So it's a complex. Engagement is not simple. Most of us think of engagement as just satisfaction, and often it has very little to do with satisfaction, because most businesses don't want an unproductive yet satisfied person, right? We want somebody who is engaged, which goes beyond satisfaction and starts to show that, hey, this is my family. This is almost like my business, and so I'm going to do whatever it takes to make it successful. And getting to that state is easy to explain, but very difficult to do as a business. How do you get an associate or an employee to think of themselves that way?
Well, and I guess that kind of leads me to the question: what did Home Depot decide to do, or what can an organization decide to do if they understand? You guys understood that this key factor was lacking in the lower performing stores. So, is there a way to bring the leaders of those stores along so that they can increase those different factors that play into the engagement equation?
Yeah, and so when I would say to try to explain it more plainly and maybe more simply than it really is in some ways, but you first need to get if you're looking at it from a leadership perspective, you need to get the leaders to believe, to buy into the fact that this matters and it matters to them. And if we were to create higher levels of engagement, that they themselves would look more effective. They would do better as leaders. The store would do better. They would gain whatever benefits or rewards they would get by doing better. So you start with what's in it for me.
Mm-hmm.
Do I feel the passion, the desire to pursue this, to try to explore how do I do this? And then you get to that point of, okay, now that I'm convinced, now show me how to do it. What are the techniques? What are the things I should be doing as a leader differently to drive levels of engagement, higher levels of engagement? So, the simple change management model of, I need to see that this is an opportunity for me. I need to support it. I need to support the notion that, hey, this is super important, and then show me how to do it. Then teach me, and then let's maintain that behavior. That especially if it's new behavior, let's make sure that we maintain it over time until it becomes a habit and part of my leadership style. So we're pursuing and have pursued that avenue of how do we get leaders. And so in a more practical way, you create a metric, you create a something that's clear to them. They said, this is how we're going to measure your success around how engaged your associates are in the store, for example, or in the district or in the region. So we use metrics to hold people accountable for to drive engagement. So once you see that that's part of the report card, that's part of how I'm going to be appraised, if you will, then it just, you increase the levels of motivation around, okay, I got to pay attention to this because I'm being evaluated. So that helps. But then, of course, the how do you do it? So we've done a number of things in that area. But I like to say that in addition to the leadership component, because often we think about it's all about leadership, which is a big part of it too. But as I was saying earlier, when I was trying to talk a little bit about how to measure engagement and how to think about engagement, some of it is the person themselves, the associate. So hiring the right people and knowing how to do that and figuring out, well, what do I ask in an interview or on an assessment or some kind of test? What do I measure so that I have a higher likelihood of bringing people into the environment that connect well with who we are, what we do, and what we're all about. And that's been something we've been on. We've been on that journey for the last 2 or 3 years, and we've just recently launched a new online application form and series of questions that are attempting to help us sort through the hundreds of thousands of people who apply for an hourly job. How do we determine which are the ones that we really want to sit with and interview and pursue, and which ones should we make an offer to? So I think it's a combination of both, right? You have to have the right leadership and the right environment, but you also have the right people to begin with who will welcome and appreciate what you have to offer. Otherwise, it's just not going to work.
Right.
I mean, some folks, I imagine, are great fits for life in the military, and some folks are not. So how do you know who's likely to do really well? And then let's pursue those people, versus those who are probably not going to be a good fit for an environment like that. So the same thing is true for us and any other business.
That's funny. That's what I did my research in my graduate program. I was in the military then, and that's what my research is about. What was those predictors? So
I hope I described it somewhat accurately in terms of because I mean, and we can use any other example, right? It could be religious life, it could be anything. It's just like, you know, you have to have a great program and great leaders, but you have to hopefully have a way of assessing talent so that you have a leg up and you're inviting people who are more likely to find your environment energizing and what you're all about exciting to them.
Very good, very good. Okay. So I want to switch gears a little bit here. We've talked about a lot of thherings. I first got introduced to you when you were a panelist at a SHRM event here in Atlanta at Society for Human Resource Management. And you made a statement that really stuck in my head, and I wanted to ask you more about it. But it was something to the effect of, when we say we need diversity because it's the right thing to do, what they hear is we have to accept lower quality. But I also, it seemed to me that you said that there was research behind it that suggests diversity actually gives us better quality. So could you talk about that?
Yeah, I guess what I was alluding to, and it's just, the first piece wasn't so much based on any research, but rather, 20, 30 years of talking to leaders in my consulting, life, and often hearing kind of behind the scenes reactions to efforts to push minorities, whatever that minority group may be, whoever that might be, to kind of push it on, make the company feel that, you have to promote people from this group, or you have to hire more people from this group. And what I've noticed sometimes is that the majority group, whoever that group may be, right, the majority group may initially react to that attempt as, well, we're not talking about talent, or you're not telling me to hire the most skilled human being that I can find. You're asking me to hire somebody or promote somebody based on a specific trade or nationality or whatever, not national, but, like ethnic group or whatever, or gender. So it's like, well, are we looking to hire great talent, or are we looking to hire people from that group? And it often didn't jive. I could see people struggling with that notion of, are you really asking me, are you trying to meet a quota, but in many ways asking me to hire people that are of, not quite as prepared or likely to be as effective. And that can be pretty damaging, because if you do indeed end up hiring someone who's not 100% ready, regardless of what group they come from, and then that person doesn't do well, it continues to perpetuate the notion that that's why we often don't hire people from that group, because, deep down we don't understand them, they're not part of us, they're different from us, and now that you've made me hire somebody like this and they didn't work out, now it just continues to emphasize the stereotype that I have in my head. So it was really, it's really the struggle that a lot of D&I, diversity and inclusion people have. That I don't work in that space, but I see that, how do you create the right message that, no, we're not asking you to lower your standards. We're not asking you that at all. In fact, in many cases, when you bring diversity of everything, including diversity of thought, even though it may be more difficult at times to work together because we're different, it actually ends up working out better in the end, because different points of view ultimately can lead to better decisions. And I can't point to specific studies per se right now, but in our own world, right? If we're trying to sell, create an environment and buy merchandise, for instance, to be sold in predominantly Hispanic markets, and those decisions are made by people that are not familiar with the Hispanic culture and their attitudes towards maintaining your home and cleaning your home and all that home improvement stuff that we do at Depot. If you don't have that understanding, then you're not likely to do as well as if you were to include that portion, that level of insight into your business. We know that women make a very large number of the purchases, including at Home Depot. Do we have the lens of leaders and others who are women who would say, here's another way of thinking about it. Here's another way of us being more competitive in the marketplace. And so there's a lot of evidence out there that, that when everybody comes together and it's a heterogeneous group, they get along really well because, there's a lot in common, but there's also some blind spots that they don't even realize they have. So bringing more diversity can only help a business if you can work through the initial, issues that arise when different people come together to try to achieve a goal.
Yeah,
so that's what I was thinking when I made that statement, is that we cannot sell it as it's just the right thing to do. I mean, we have to transcend and say, and it's also the smart thing to do from a business perspective, beyond the more philosophical, hey, we got to help society. This is not about helping society only, it's also making you stronger and more competitive as a business.
Nice. I did hear of some research, and I haven't tracked down the research itself, but that said that it's harder to make decisions in a diverse group, and the diverse group doesn't always feel like they've made the best decision, maybe, but that they and that heterogeneous groups make it seems they're more convinced that they've made the right decision, and it's easier to work together. But then the results are that the diverse group actually makes a better decision, a better outcome than the homogeneous group. So I thought that was fascinating.
You're fading out a little.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Having a hard...
Can you hear me better now?
Yeah.
Okay. I might have swiveled my chair and okay.
So that's what I was thinking as well. And sometimes you don't even have to look at actual research. You can see it yourself in the workplace, when you have people who have different personalities and different perspectives. Yeah, it is a little bit more challenging to get everybody to agree or to focus on a specific path, but usually that difference brings they put stuff on the table that's like, wow, this is really helpful, because we would have never thought about it this way if it wasn't for you. So it certainly enhances the quality of the decision making. Yeah.
Very good. Well, can I ask, as long as you don't, I don't want you to give away any proprietary information, but are there one or two how-tos that you could give the leaders that are listening, as far as a couple of things that they can do to help increase their employee engagement in their workplaces?
Well, there's lots of stuff that we could do. There's one thing that we don't do very well in general, and there is actually quite a bit of research externally, as well as within Home Depot, that indicates that leaders typically are not very good at developing people, and development is a key part of why and how an associate feels engaged with their boss and with their company. If you care about me, if you invest in me, if you're asking me where I'd like to take my career, if you are encouraging me maybe to go slightly beyond what I thought was capable, and if you help me be more successful, then I'm less likely to want to leave you, and I'm more likely to think of you as, wow, I'll do anything for you because you're treating me again with respect, with care, and I matter. And we're really bad at developing people. Lominger did a great piece of research. Lominger is now owned by Korn Ferry, but the Center for Creative Leadership and then Lominger, they did global research looking at 67 competencies, leadership competencies, and through a 360 tool they have called Voices, they began measuring year over year which competency of the 67 was rated the lowest, and developing others was almost every year was at the bottom of all the different competencies you can think of. Developing others was at the bottom. So I know that even if Deep was not very good at it, I know that our competition is probably equally as bad, if not worse. So our job is to try to be better, right? So we not only are we increasing the capabilities of our people, but also increasing their levels of engagement. So I would say all that stuff that you see around leadership development, and how leaders can help develop people is critical. It is very difficult to do, and that's why it's at the bottom. So we have done and are doing quite a few things to try to turn that around. And it's a wide spectrum of interventions, from the typical stuff that you would think about in terms of providing classes and new tools for associates. But we're trying to kind of change the mindset of a leader around a key part of your job is indeed developing people. So before you even begin developing others, you have to figure out what does it take to be successful in the role that the person is in or the role they aspire to. How do you assess the person against that criteria? So what are the gaps? And then how do we close the gaps? And we are, as a rule of thumb, we pursue that 70-20-10 development paradigm, right, where 10% is kind of stuff that you read about, classes you take to kind of give you that foundational piece. The 20% is around learning from others. So we are looking for mentors, coaches, and we encourage people to kind of spend time and observe those who do that one thing really well, connect with them, network with them, watch them in action, learn from how they do what they do. But the 70% part of the equation is just, putting yourself out there and forcing yourself in many ways to be in situations where you have to demonstrate that skill, especially if we've given you enough of a foundational know-how and you've got a mentor of sorts. Then how do you get out there, volunteer for specific jobs, do cross-functional assignments, rotate from one job to another? How do you put yourself in situations where you have to demonstrate that new skill and practice it over and over and over again? It's a pretty complicated thing to do. So it's super simple to say and explain, but it's very complicated to do. But I think that's a key thing in engagement that sometimes we forget because we think it's about pay, we think it's about benefits, we think it's about making people happy and satisfied. And if anything, it has to do with showing that I've got your back, I care about you, and I'm going to help you develop if that's what you want. If that's your ambition, I'm going to be here to help you become more effective and give you, hopefully, the tools that you need to get promoted, which is what a lot of folks yearn for, right, is to make more money and to get promoted and do better as their career progresses.
That's brilliant value and so valuable. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
So as we're getting ready to wrap up, I have just a couple more questions. Is there anything that we haven't touched on? Any question you wish I had asked that would help the leaders that are listening to this podcast?
No, I don't think so. I mean, there's just
so much, right?
Yeah. So much that we could go after. One challenge that we have here, which is a little related to everything we're talking about, but one challenge that we have here at Depot, and most of the people listening would probably relate to that, is that change, the pace of change in business is continuing to dramatically increase, and depending on what business you're in, like in retail, everybody listening to this probably is very much aware that things have changed dramatically, right? Mm-hmm. When Amazon and the ability to search for stuff online and buy things online and have it shipped to your house. Very different than 20, 30 years ago, when you had to basically know a lot about something if you wanted to do it yourself, or go to the library or ask a neighbor, but you couldn't do research online. So change is everywhere, and some great businesses are starting to go under. Businesses of 20, 30 years ago, highly admired businesses, end up becoming obsolete. And so to stay relevant, the leader has to understand how to work with change, and how to handle change, and how to help associates or employees deal with change. And that's another key element of leadership that often we don't cover a whole lot, even in leadership development. And it is some of the basic skills that you need to manage change correctly are also applied in the engagement side, and in the development side, because if you're trying to get an associate to do some things differently, to try out a new behavior, to maybe take some risks that they're not comfortable with in order to stretch and grow, it's all about change. It's all about doing something different. And so applying those principles, very critical to making a leader successful. And unfortunately, we don't spend a whole lot of time on that, teaching leaders how to understand the human side of change. We think about project management. We think about, we'll move these pieces, we'll make this announcement. Sometimes we think about change as just an email, or somebody getting on a stage saying, this is our new direction, this is what we're doing differently. But trying to know more, understand more the human side of change. Like, how do you get somebody to go on this journey with you because they want to, not because they have to, is a pretty challenging skill to master. But I think it'll be increasingly more and more important in the future.
Very cool. Very good. Well, thank you very much for that. And I guess my final question would be, what have been one or two pleasant surprises along the way in this journey of employee engagement and the research and all?
Pleasant surprises. Well, I don't know. I mean, it's. I don't know if it was a surprise, but we looked at different types of populations within Home Depot. We looked at the millennials, and we looked at the traditionalists. We have folks that have retired and are working part-time because they want to, and they want to stay busy, and I was surprised to see that there weren't the differences that we sometimes would expect. When it comes down to engagement, it's such a most groups shared the same qualities that we were looking for. They all want the same thing. Frankly, even development. You would think somebody who's retired would not care a whole lot about development, but these are folks who are very interested in taking care of the customer and understanding the new technologies, understanding the new products, knowing how to sell them differently and better. So it's not a millennial thing, right? It's not like, these new millennials that have all these new expectations, and back in the day, we didn't. I mean, the world is changing, but every generation, regardless of what group you want to segment people in, they seem to have very similar needs. And back in school, when I began learning about motivation, and always in the first chapter of human motivation, they talk about Maslow and the hierarchy of needs, and you think, this is so outdated, and this is so, but it really isn't so outdated, actually. I mean, when we did our research here, it sort of confirmed that if I can take care of your basic needs, pay and predictable schedules, and you've got the basics, then people begin asking for the next level. and engagement is kind of towards the top. But before I worry about engagement, I got to make sure that I'm paying you a livable wage, and that you're managing your life, right? You can put food on the table, you can put gas in the car, you can do all these things, and then I can begin to worry about these other pieces. And all the generations and all the different groups seem to share that in common. So I thought, I don't know if it was a bit of a surprise, because we thought maybe we'd find differences, and we really didn't. That's
fascinating. Very cool. Very cool. Well, Dr. Garcia, thank you so much for your time and sharing your knowledge with us, and we so do appreciate it.
It was a lot of fun. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
This podcast was brought to you by Bigger Brains, online training that won't bore you to tears. Expand the minds of your workforce at getbiggerbrains.com. Thanks for tuning in to Permission to Speak. If you want to increase collaboration and innovation in your organization, check out more resources available at speakingpractically.com, or give me a call, Kelly Vandever, at 770-597-1108.